Hello, second grade, and welcome back to our YouTube channel. Today we're going to be reading chapters 7 and 8 of Charlotte's Web. I hope you've been enjoying the book so far. Before we start reading, let's take a look at the poster I have back here. Here is our Charlotte's Web poster. I've changed the characters especially since the last time we read together. The Arable family is first on the list, and that's made up of Mom, Dad, Avery, and Fern. Fern is the girl that was taking care of Wilbur at the beginning, and the Arables are the ones that had the pigs where Wilbur was born. All right, the next characters on our list are the Zuckermans, and that's Uncle Homer and Aunt Edith. They're the ones that bought Wilbur from the Arable family. So Wilbur lives at the Zuckermans' house now. Then we have Lurvy. You've met Lurvy since I've read with you last. Lurvy is kind of the farm hand on the Zuckerman's farm. He helps feed the animals and take care of the farm. Then we have Wilbur, the main character of our book, the pig. We have Templeton the rat. And now we just met Charlotte the spider. There's also other animals in the story, but they don't really have names. We just call them like the goose and the gander and things like that. Then on the other side of our poster, we have room for the vocabulary that we're going to read in chapters 7 and 8 today. So if we come across any new words, we'll write them up there and talk about what they mean. All right, before we start reading, I wanted to talk about kind of a little bit of a math topic with you. If you take a look at the table of contents, and every time we start a new chapter, the numbers aren't really numbers. It's not chapter 1, chapter 2, how we're used to seeing the numbers. For example, let's take a look at chapter 5, which is on page 32. Hopefully you have your book and you're looking along with me. Chapter 5 was called Charlotte, but here that's not a 5, that's a V. This type of numbering system is called Roman numerals. Roman numerals use letters instead of numbers that take place of the numbers. So a V actually stands for the number 5 in Roman numerals. And then if we look back, take a look at chapter 2. Chapter 2 is on page 8. If you see, instead of the number 2, we have an I and then another I. One I means the number 1. So 2 I's means the number 2. So if a V is 5 and I's mean 1s, we're going to be reading chapter 7 today. So what letters do you think mean the number 7? Think about it. Chapter 7 is on page 48. So go ahead and turn there. Hopefully you thought about what kind of Roman numerals will make up the number 7. And here it is. The 5, remember we said is V. And the I's are 1s. So 5, 1, 1 makes 7. So this is the number 7 in Roman numerals. So that's something interesting. There's other letters that stand for other numbers like 10 and hundreds. So we won't have 100 chapters in this book, but I'm sure at some point throughout school you'll learn more about Roman numerals. So that's just a little mini lesson about Roman numerals for you. All right, so like I said, we're reading chapter 7, which starts on page 48. If you don't already have your copy of the book out, please get it and start reading along with me. Remember, just listening to a story doesn't help you become a better reader. Following along and looking at the words on the page does help you become a better reader because it helps you recognize new words in the story. There's some tricky words in this book, so it's important you're following along with me. All right, page 48, chapter 7. It's called Bad News. Uh-oh, I wonder what the bad news will be. Take a second, you can pause the video if you want to. Predict or infer, what bad news do you think is going to happen in this chapter? Will it be bad news for Fern? Do you think they're going to have to get rid of Wilbur? Will it be bad news for the Zuckermans? Will it be bad news for Wilbur or Charlotte? What do you think the bad news will be? Hopefully you made an inference about it. All right, let's start reading. Again, this is page 48. Bad news. Wilbur liked Charlotte better and better each day. Her campaign against insects seemed sensible and useful. Hardly anybody around the farm had a good word to say for a fly. Flies spent their time pestering others. Pester means to bother, like being a pest. The cows hated them, the horses detested them, the sheep loathed them. Loathed is another word for hated. Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman were always complaining about them and putting up screens. Yeah, people don't like flies, huh? Wilbur admired the way Charlotte managed. He was particularly glad that she always put her victim to sleep before eating it. I'm going to pause right there. That word victim. That's a good word for us to put on our board. Victim means like the person who's getting hurt or the person who's having a crime committed against them. Kind of like the prey if we're talking about animals. So Charlotte's the predator, the fly is the prey or the victim. The fly is the one getting eaten. Let me write that on our board. So I wrote the word victim up there. I also wrote the word loathing since we talked about what loathing means. It means like hating something. So the people were loathing the flies, and the fly is the victim of Charlotte. All right, let's keep reading. We're still on page 48. So Wilbur had just said that he was glad that Charlotte put the victim to sleep before eating it. "It's real thoughtful of you to do that, Charlotte," he said. "Yes," she replied in her sweet musical voice. "I always give them an anesthetic so that they won't feel pain. It's a little service I throw in." All right, I'm going to pause there again because there's a new really big word. The word anesthetic looks like this. Anesthetic. I want you to think about if you've ever been to the dentist, which probably all of us hopefully have. If you've ever had a cavity, what they'll do is they'll put something, they'll kind of give you a shot so that you don't feel it when they're fixing your cavity. That's a type of anesthetic. It kind of numbs that area so that you don't feel pain. Another different type of anesthetic is if you were going to have a big surgery, like if they were going to take your tonsils out or your appendix out or something like that. They would give you an anesthetic that would not only kind of numb that pain, but actually put you to sleep so that you don't feel anything. So that's what Charlotte is doing to the bugs before she eats them. Instead of them being awake and feeling her eating them, which would probably be really painful, she gives them an anesthetic, which makes them be asleep or at least not feel pain while she eats them. So Wilbur is saying that that's nice of her to give them that anesthetic. Hopefully that makes sense. As the days went by, Wilbur grew and grew. He ate 3 big meals a day. He spent long hours lying on his side, half asleep, dreaming pleasant dreams. He enjoyed good health, and he gained a lot of weight. One afternoon, when Fern was sitting on her stool, the oldest sheep walked into the barn and stopped to pay a call on Wilbur. "Hello," she said. "Seems to me you're putting on weight." "Yes, I guess I am," replied Wilbur. "At my age, it's a good idea to keep gaining." "Just the same, I don't envy you," said the old sheep. Envy, that's a good word for our board. Let me put it up there. Okay, so that word we were talking about earlier, anesthetic, is up there. And now the word envy. Envy means the same thing as being jealous. So when the sheep says, "I don't envy you," she's meaning I'm not jealous of you. So let's see why she's not jealous of Wilbur. She says, "Just the same, I don't envy you," said the old sheep. "You know why they're fattening you up, don't you?" "No," said Wilbur. "Well, I don't like to spread bad news," said the sheep, "but they're fattening you up because they're going to kill you. That's why." "They're going to what?" screamed Wilbur. Fern grew rigid on her stool. Rigid means you're really stiff, like when you're scared or you get some bad news. "Kill you, turn you into smoked bacon and ham," continued the old sheep. That's it. If you didn't know, if you eat bacon or ham, it's actually pig. So Wilbur has just been told that he's going to be killed and made into bacon. "Almost all young pigs get murdered by the farmer as soon as the real cold weather sets in. There's a regular conspiracy around here to kill you at Christmas time. Everybody's in on the plot." Lurvy, Zuckerman, even John Arable. Mr. Arable? Sobbed Wilbur. Fern's father? Certainly. When a pig is to be butchered, everybody helps. I'm an old sheep, and I see the same thing, same old business, year after year. Arable arrives with his .22, shoots that's a type of gun. Stop! Screamed Wilbur. I don't want to die. Save me, somebody, save me. Fern was just about to jump up when a voice was heard. Be quiet, Wilbur, said Charlotte, who had been listening to this awful conversation. All right, here's the picture of when the sheep gave Wilbur the bad news. See, he's crying. Poor Wilbur. All right, Charlotte said, be quiet, Wilbur. I can't be quiet, screamed Wilbur, racing up and down. I don't want to be killed. I don't want to die. Is it true what the old sheep says, Charlotte? Is it true they are going to kill me when the cold weather comes? Well, said the spider, plucking thoughtfully at her web, the old sheep has been around this barn a long time. She has seen many a spring pig come and go. If she says they plan to kill you, I'm sure it's true. It's also the dirtiest trick I ever heard of. What people don't think of. Wilbur burst into tears. I don't want to die, he moaned. I want to stay alive, right here in my comfortable manure pile with all my friends. I want to breathe the beautiful air and lie in the beautiful sun. You're certainly making a beautiful noise, snapped the old sheep. She is being so mean. I don't want to die, screamed Wilbur, throwing himself to the ground. You shall not die, said Charlotte briskly. It means kind of quickly. What, really? Cried Wilbur. Who's going to save me? I am, said Charlotte. How? Asked Wilbur. That remains to be seen, but I am going to save you, and I want you to quiet down immediately. You're carrying on in a childish way. Stop your crying. I can't stand hysterics. The last word of that chapter is hysterics. It means being kind of really super emotional and kind of crazy. Another word really similar is hysterical, and that's when someone's going on kind of crazily. So she's saying, like, you're being kind of crazy and I can't stand it. But Charlotte just made Wilbur a promise. She said that she's going to save him so that he doesn't die. That's really nice of her to say, but think about it. How is a spider going to save humans from killing a pig to eat him for Christmas dinner? That seems like she's going to need a really good plan. All right, turn the page. We're going to start reading chapter 8. It's on page 52. Before we start, remember how we were talking about Roman numerals? Remember we said V means 5 and I means 1? 5, 1, 1, and 1. 5 and 3 ones makes 8. So this is chapter 8. It's called A Talk at Home. Again, we're on page 52. On Sunday morning, Mr. and Mrs. Arable and Fern were sitting at breakfast in the kitchen. Avery had finished and was upstairs looking for his slingshot. Did you know that Uncle Homer's goslings had hatched? Asked Fern. How many? Asked Mr. Arable. 7, replied Fern. There were 8 eggs, but 1 egg didn't hatch, and the goose told Templeton she didn't want it anymore, so he took it away. The goose did what? Asked Mrs. Arable, gazing at her daughter with a queer, worried look. So she's looking at her kind of like this, kind of strangely. The goose told Templeton she didn't want the egg anymore, repeated Fern. Who's Templeton? Asked Mrs. Arable. He's the rat, replied Fern. None of us like him much. Who's us? Asked Mr. Arable. Oh, everybody in the barn cellar. Wilbur and the sheep and the lambs and the goose and the gander and the goslings and Charlotte and me. Charlotte? Asked Mrs. Arable. Who's Charlotte? She's Wilbur's best friend. She's terribly clever. Clever means smart. What does she look like? Asked Mrs. Arable. Well, said Fern thoughtfully. See how well has more L's than it should right here? That's because she's, instead of just going well, she's going well, kind of like how we draw out our words sometimes. That's what the author is doing there. So, well, said Fern thoughtfully, she has 8 legs. All spiders do, I guess. Charlotte is a spider? asked Fern's mother. Fern nodded. A big gray one. She has a web across the top of Wilbur's doorway. She catches flies and sucks their blood. Wilbur adores her. Does he really? Said Mrs. Arable, rather vaguely. She was staring at Fern with a worried expression on her face. Oh, yes, Wilbur adores Charlotte, said Fern. Do you know what Charlotte said when the goslings hatched? I haven't the faintest idea, said Mr. Arable. Tell us. When he says, I haven't the faintest idea, he's saying, like, I have no idea. Well, when the first gosling stuck its little head out from under the goose, I was sitting on my stool in the corner and Charlotte was on her web. She made a speech. She said, I am sure that every one of us here in the barn cellar will be gratified to learn that after 4 weeks of unremitting effort and patience on the part of the goose, she now has something to show for it. Don't you think that was a pleasant thing for her to say? Yes, I do, said Mrs. Arable. And now, Fern, it's time to get ready for Sunday school, and tell Avery to get ready, and this afternoon you can tell me more about what goes on in Uncle Homer's barn. Aren't you spending quite a lot of time there? You go there almost every afternoon, don't you? I like it there, replied Fern. She wiped her mouth and ran upstairs. After she had left the room, Mrs. Arable spoke in a low voice to her husband. I worry about Fern, she said. Did you hear the way she rambled on about the animals, pretending that they talked? Mr. Arable chuckled. Maybe they do talk, he said. I've sometimes wondered. At any rate, don't worry about Fern. She's just got a lively imagination. Kids think they hear all sorts of things. Just the same, I do worry about her, replied Mrs. Arable. I think I shall ask Dr. Dorian about her the next time I see him. He loves Fern almost as much as we do, and I want him to know how queerly she's acting about that pig and everything. That means how strangely she's acting about the pig. I don't think it's normal. You know perfectly well animals don't talk. Mr. Arable grinned. Maybe our ears aren't as sharp as Fern's, he said. All right, Mr. Arable, let's talk about what that means. That was actually the end of chapter 8 there on page 54. But before we end the video, I want to talk about what just happened on that page. So first of all, Mr. Arable said in that last sentence, he said maybe our ears aren't as sharp as Fern's. That doesn't mean pointy or actually sharp, like something like a knife or scissors or something would be sharp. That means sharp like smart or like picking up things well. So if you're talking about an ear being sharp, that means it can hear a lot of sounds that maybe other people don't hear as well. For example, dogs hear a lot more sounds than humans do. So you would say that dogs have more sharp or sharper ears than people. So he's saying, like, maybe we don't hear as well as Fern. But let's talk about the mom is really worried about Fern. Why do you think she's so worried about Fern? She kind of explained a little bit, but she didn't explain super well. So if you want, go ahead and take a second to pause this video and think about why is Fern's mom so worried about her? Go ahead, hit pause. All right, hopefully you've thought about it. So the reason that Fern's mom is so worried about her is because she basically spent, I know chapter 8 was a short chapter, but she kind of spent the whole chapter telling her parents what all of the different animals are saying in the barn. And she is saying that the pig and the spider are best friends, and that when the geese had their babies, their baby goslings, that the spider made a speech and she repeated the speech that the spider said. So the mom's thinking, my daughter's kind of crazy, right? She's so worried about her because she's saying that the animals are saying all sorts of kind of weird things. And she's like, animals don't talk. My daughter's saying that they talk, and even saying that they have speeches and that they're pigs and spiders are best friends. She's acting really strangely. And she thinks her daughter's spending too much time in the barn with the animals, that she's thinking they're talking, and maybe not spending enough time with other kids her age. So she's saying at the bottom she's going to ask Dr. Dorian. So the next time she's at the doctor's office, she's going to ask him about Fern and how she's being kind of weird talking about the animals saying they're talking. Because think about it, we don't hear animals talking, right? So she thinks Fern's making it up, although in this book Fern is hearing what they're saying, although we know that's not real. That's one reason the book's fiction. But Mrs. Arable's really worried about it. So we'll see what happens with that. Mrs. Arable will talk to the doctor about Fern, so we'll see what the doctor has to say later on. I'm not sure which chapter that comes. Maybe that comes soon or maybe a little bit later. All right, so now what you're going to do is you're going to go on Google Classroom to the assignment for today, or the same pages are in the packet, and you're going to do the pages about chapter 7 and 8 for Charlotte's Web. Again, I hope you're enjoying the book. We're almost sort of halfway done, maybe like a third done. So I hope you're enjoying it, and I'll see you next time.